everyone. I'm Emma, and a very warm welcome to English Now. We really believe in English for all here. It's just great to have you with us for this episode.
Hello, this is Alex.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to exploring today's topic with you all. We're going to be focusing on jobs and work. I mean, it's something that touches all of our lives, right? One way or another.
Absolutely.
And together we'll learn how to, ask and answer questions about different professions and the places where people actually work.
Sounds great. So let's get straight into our lesson.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
Right. So in this episode, we're diving into the world of jobs and work. It's such a fundamental aspect of our society, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Whether we're talking about our own career or, simply asking someone we've just met, what do you do? It's a question that just comes up time and time again.
It really does. It's such a key part of how we understand each other and, well, connect on a daily basis. Being able to talk about what you do and also understanding what others do, it's so important for just everyday conversations.
Absolutely. And building on our previous episode where we looked at countries and nationalities, hope you all found that helpful, by the way, we're now moving on to another really essential area of communication.
Right.
We're going to be learning how to use the simple present tense for regular actions related to work, verbs like work and live. You'll see how often these pop up when discussing jobs.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And we'll also be looking at those little bit, super important words, a and an,
Yes, the articles.
and how they fit in when we're talking about different jobs. It might seem like a small detail, but honestly, using them correctly really adds clarity to what you're saying.
Exactly. Plus, we're going to be expanding our vocabulary, lots of common job titles, and the typical places where people work.
Good stuff.
And of course, we'll have some dialogues to show you how all these pieces fit together in a natural, real-life conversation. So are you ready to get started with talking about work?
Absolutely. Let's start with the grammar. I think that makes sense. It's the framework, right? Helps us build our sentences.
Good plan.
So in this episode, our main focus is on this simple present tense.
What's fascinating here is how we use this tense for things that are generally true, or maybe for actions that we do regularly, which, well, it perfectly describes most of our jobs, doesn't it?
It really does.
Think about it. If you say, I work at a hospital, that's not just about what you're doing this very second.
Yeah,
It's a general statement about your profession.
exactly. And if you remember from a previous episode, we looked at the different forms of the verb to be, am, is, are.
Yeah.
Well, now we're taking that a step further.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at other verbs, action verbs like work, live, teach, speak. These are all words we use frequently when talking about our daily lives and our jobs.
So for I, you, we, and they, the verb form stays nice and simple, right? Just its base form.
That's it.
For example, I can say, I work in an office. You might say, you live in New York.
Okay.
Together, we can say, we speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And we could also say, they teach Spanish. See? The verb stays the same. Straightforward.
It is. But here's where it gets, well, maybe a little more interesting when we talk about he, she, or it.
The third person singular.
Exactly. For these pronouns, we usually add a little es to the end of the verb. It's a small change, but it's a really, really important rule in English grammar.
That little esis makes a surprisingly big difference. So instead of saying he work, which sounds a bit off,
Right, yeah.
we correctly say he works in a hospital.
Perfect.
Instead of it becomes she lives in London.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're talking about, say, when a job starts, we'd say it starts at 9 a.m. That S is just a key marker of the simple present tense when the subject is he, she, or it.
Couldn't have said it better. Now let's move on to those small but mighty helpers.
Mm-hmm.
The articles a and an.
Right, little words, big job.
Exactly. We use these before singular nouns when we're talking about one thing in general. And you'll find they come up very, very often when we're talking about someone's job.
Think of them almost like saying one of something, but in a more general way. Now, the rule for when to use a or an, it depends entirely on the sound that the next word begins with. That's the key, isn't it? The sound.
That's absolutely the key. We use a before words that start with a consonant sound.
Mm.
It's all about what you hear, not just the letter you see written down.
Okay, got it.
So if the next word begins with a sound like B, C, D, those kinds of sounds, we usually use a.
Makes sense.
For example, we say, he is a doctor. You can clearly hear that A sound at the beginning of doctor.
Right.
Or she's a teacher with that A sound.
Yep.
And I work at a bank with that initial B sound.
Okay. And on the other hand, we use and before words that start with a vowel sound.
Exactly. Like the sounds you hear at the beginning of words like apple, egg, igloo, octopus, and umbrella. Those sounds.
A, E, I, O, U sounds, generally.
Generally, yes.
That is
So we would say she is an engineer. Listen to that E sound right at the start of engineer.
An engineer.
Or he is an artist with the A sound.
An artist, okay.
And I work in an office with that initial O sound.
An office. Got it. Now, this is a really important point to remember, isn't it? It's the sound that guides us, not always just the first letter of the word.
Yes, precisely. This can sometimes be a little unexpected or maybe tricky for learners.
Like the word hour.
Hour is a perfect example. It begins with the letter H, which we usually think of as a consonant, right?
No.
But when we say it, the H is silent. The first sound we actually hear is a vowel sound, like an out.
Yeah.
O-U-R, hour.
Ah, okay. So because of that vowel sound.
We say an hour,
Ah.
not an hour.
An hour, okay.
And the opposite can also be true sometimes. Take a word like university.
Starts with a vowel letter.
It does. But the sound at the beginning isn't It's actually more like a Y sound, like in the word university.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a consonant sound.
It is. So in this case, even though it starts with U, we say a university.
A university. Okay, that makes sense. Now, these little exceptions might seem a bit confusing at first.
It can be.
But folks shouldn't worry too much about them right now, should they?
No, not at all. The general rule, A before a consonant sound and before a vowel sound, that will cover the vast majority of cases you encounter, especially when you're talking about different jobs. That's the main thing for now.
Good point. So when someone asks you that all-important question, what do? You can now start to formulate your answer using a or an correctly. For example, you could say, I am a student, or maybe I am an architect.
Perfect. That sounds much more natural.
Fantastic. Okay, now that we've got a good handle on the basic grammar, the simple present, and Apherian, let's move on to building up our vocabulary.
Yeah, let's get some words.
Some new words that are really useful when talking about jobs and, the places where people work. We've put together a helpful list for you.
Yeah, exactly. This list includes some very common jobs and the typical places associated with them. And importantly, we've also included example sentences that show you how to put our new grammar, the simple present, the articles, into practice.
Great. So first on our list is teacher. And where does a teacher usually work?
Usually at a school.
Right. So we can put it together nice and simple. She is a teacher. She works at a school. Simple and clear.
See how it all fits. Next, we have doctor. And a doctor usually works in a hospital or maybe a clinic.
Okay.
So, for example, we can say, he is a doctor. He works in a hospital. You can see how we're using a before doctor and works with the S because the subject is he.
Yep. Following the rules. And someone who often works closely with a doctor is a nurse. And they also often work in a hospital or clinic. So you could say, my friend is a nurse. She works with doctors. Notice a before nurse again.
Perfect. Then we have engineer. Now, an engineer might work in an office or maybe for a company.
Right. Could be various places.
Yeah. So you could say, I am an engineer. I work for a big company. And here, notice we use and before engineer because of that initial E vowel sound.
An engineer.
Yeah.
Good example. And of course, many of you listening might be a student.
Very likely.
And a student typically goes to a school or perhaps a university. The sentence could be, you are a student. You study every day.
Yeah.
We use a before student because of that A's consonant sound.
Exactly. We also have artist. An artist often works in a studio or maybe just at home.
Could be.
For example, he is an artist. He paints at home. And again, we use and before artist due to that A vowel sound.
An artist. Okay. How about food? If you enjoy cooking or working with food.
You might be a chef or a cook.
Yeah.
And you would likely work in a restaurant.
Makes sense?
So she is a chef. She cooks in a restaurant.
Cool.
We use a before chef because of the chi consonant sound.
Right. Getting around town often involves a driver, like a taxi driver, for instance.
Yep. So he is a taxi driver. He drives all day. We use a before taxi driver. Simple.
Okay. Many, many people work as an office worker in an office.
Very common, yes.
So you could say they are office workers, they work in an office. Notice here, though, no a or an before office workers.
Right. Good catch. Because we're talking about they, it's plural, more than one person. So no a or an. But we do use an before the singular noun office.
Ah, good distinction. Okay. And finally, someone involved in business might be called a business person. often working in an office or for a company. So my father is a business person. He travels a lot. Again, A before business person.
That covers a good range. These are just some of the common jobs you might hear about, of course.
Definitely not all of them.
Not by a long shot.
Yeah.
But we also have a few other really useful words and phrases that are related to this whole topic of jobs and work.
Okay, what else?
Well, for instance, we've already used it a few times today. What do you do?
The key question.
Absolutely. It's the most common and direct way to ask someone about their job or profession.
And then we have the verb work. Simple enough. You can just say, I work. Very straightforward.
Yep. And the related noun is job, as in, I have a job.
Okay.
We also mentioned the word company, which refers to a business organization. You might hear someone say, he works for a tech company.
Right. And another important verb, especially if you're a student, is study.
Crucial one.
For example, they study English.
Oh, and here's a little note that's quite common, particularly in American English.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes, instead of just asking, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
People might ask, what do you do for a living?
For a living.
Yeah, it has exactly the same meaning. They're just asking about your job. Just another way to phrase it.
Good to know. Okay, great. So now that we've built up our vocabulary and we've taken a closer look at the grammar.
The building blocks are in place.
Exactly. Let's see how it all comes together in some example conversations. This is where you can really see how people use this language in, everyday situations.
Yeah, this is the fun part, seeing it in action. These dialogues will give you a feel for how people naturally talk about their jobs and ask others about theirs.
Okay, let's look at our first one. It's between two people, Lee and Kenji.
Right. So the conversation kicks off with Lee saying, hi, Kenji, how are you? Pretty standard greeting.
Mm-hmm.
And Kenji replies, I'm good, Lee. How about you? What do you do? And bam, there it is.
There's that key question we just learned. What do you do?
Exactly.
And Lee answers, I am a student. I study engineering at the university. She correctly uses a before student and the verb study in the simple present tense.
Perfect answer. Then Lee turns the question back to Kenji. She asks, what do you do?
Fair enough.
And Kenji responds, I'm an office worker. I work for a Japanese company here.
He also correctly uses and before office worker because of that ah vowel sound and work in the simple present.
Great. And then Lee shows interest in Kenji's response, which is nice. She says, oh, interesting. Do you like your job? Yeah, that's a very natural follow-up question, isn't it? When you learn about someone's profession. Shows you're listening.
Definitely. Okay, now let's take a look at another conversation. This time it's between Sarah and Ben. And in this one, they're talking about someone else's job, Sarah's brother.
Right, so talking about a third person, Sarah starts by saying, my brother lives in Chicago.
Okay.
And Ben, showing interest, asks, oh, really? What does he do?
Okay, this is an important point to notice. What does he do? Not what do he do?
Exactly. Because we're asking about he, third person singular, we use does in the question form of the simple present.
Right. We'll probably dive deeper into forming questions in future episodes, I imagine.
We will, absolutely. But it's good to start noticing it now.
Definitely. And Sarah answers Ben's question by saying, he is a doctor. He works in a big hospital.
There it is again. Correct use of a before doctor, and the verb works with that crucial ace ending because the subject is he.
Yep. And Ben's reaction is quite enthusiastic, he says. Wow, a doctor. That's a great job.
It often gets that reaction. And Sarah agrees, yes, he likes it a lot. He helps many people. Notice again, the verbs likes and helps both have that S ending because they refer back to he.
Right. Consistent use of that third person's S.
Yeah.
So in these two short dialogues, you can really see how the grammar and vocabulary we've been learning about are used in everyday, real-life conversations about jobs and professions.
They really bring it to life, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay, now,
It's your turn.
the listener's turn.
Yes, time to actively use what you've learned. We have a few practice activities lined up for you.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the best way to learn a language is by putting it into practice yourself. Speaking it.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, first activity.
Mm-hmm.
Think about yourself. Answer the question, what do you do? Try saying it aloud right now. I am a bay in your job, or maybe I work in a bay in your workplace.
Yeah, give it a go. And hey, even if you're not currently working in a traditional job, that's fine. You could talk about your studies by saying, I'm a student.
Yeah. Or perhaps mention a previous job if you're comfortable. Or maybe what you do generally, like I look after my family or something. Just practice forming the sentence.
Good point. Okay, next, let's get some practice with that important es sound at the end of verbs when the subject is he, she, or it.
That tricky little es.
Try saying these sentences clearly aloud. He works.
Works.
She teaches.
Teaches.
He lives.
Lives.
She drives.
Really focus on making that S or S sound clearly at the end of each verb.
Good. Then let's work a bit more on using a or an correctly. Go back to our list of common jobs we mentioned earlier.
That list.
Try saying each job out loud with the correct article, either a or an just before it. For example, you would say,
A teacher.
an engineer,
A student.
an artist, and so on. Just pay close attention to the initial sound of each job title.
Sound, sound, sound. Okay, and finally, think about your family members or maybe your friends. What do they do for work?
Good idea. Makes it personal.
Yeah. Practice making simple sentences about them using what you've learned today. For example, you could say, my mother is a Job, or my friend works at a workplace. This is a really great way to personalize the language and make it more relevant, more memorable for your own life.
Definitely helps it stick. Well, everyone, you've done a fantastic job working through this episode with us. You're making really, really great progress with your English language learning journey.
Absolutely. Seriously, well done. In this episode, you've successfully learned how to talk about different jobs and professions.
Yep.
How to ask that very important question, what do you do? And how to correctly use the simple present tense, remembering that all important A's for the pronouns he, she, and it.
You've also learned the rules for using a and ain correctly before job titles, which is crucial.
It really is.
And you've significantly built up your vocabulary related to common jobs and the places where people typically work.
So now you have the essential tools, the basic building blocks, to start having simple conversations about what people do for work, which, as we said, is a really common and fundamental topic in everyday communication.
So important. Remember to keep practicing these new skills. Don't let them get rusty.
Definitely practice. And coming up next week, we have another really useful and practical lesson in store for you all.
Ooh, what is it?
We'll be diving into the topic of daily routines and telling time.
Ah, another essential one.
Totally. So you can learn how to talk about the things you do every day and, crucially, how to tell the time accurately in English. We really hope you'll join us for that episode.
Sounds fantastic. Well, everyone, that brings us pretty much to the end of our English Now lesson for this episode, all about jobs and work.
Yeah, time flew.
It did. We sincerely hope that you've all learned a lot of useful language and are feeling, a bit more confident about discussing different professions in English.
You've all done such a fantastic job today, really, and we are incredibly proud of the progress you are making with your English language skills. Keep up the great work.
Absolutely. And we're already looking forward to our next episode, like you said, focusing on daily routines and telling time.
Gotta be good.
So make sure you're ready to learn some really practical vocabulary and phrases for talking about your everyday activities and, yeah, understanding how to tell time in English. It's going to be another very helpful lesson, we think.
Definitely. We're really excited to see you all then. Goodbye from English Now for now.
Bye, everyone. Keep practicing.